Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So today we are at day 41 of our complete DevOps course, and in this video we will be learning about config maps and secrets in Kubernetes. So on a very high level, what we will learn is what is a config map in Kubernetes. We'll learn the why aspect of what is a secret, why a secret does exist in Kubernetes. Then we will try to understand a classic interview question, that is the difference between config map and secret. So this is a very popular interview question, right? And then we will also try to do a live demo. So this video is going to have a live demo where we will try to see how to create config map, how to create secret, different types of secrets, and then we will finally see how to reference or how to use these ones inside a pod or deployment of your Kubernetes, right? So this is going to be a long video, and without wasting any time, let's quickly jump onto the video. But before that, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, definitely consider subscribing it, because in the future I'm going to do more and more free courses where we will learn about yeah, I'll keep it suspense, and you can keep watching our community tab and Telegram channel to understand what are my future free projects. Okay, first of all, config map. So what is a config map in Kubernetes? So if you just for a couple of minutes, if you forget about Kubernetes, let's say you are a application developer or you have understanding of how application works. So you know there is an application, and let's call it as a backend application. So this backend application, what it does is it talks to a database, okay, and it retrieves some information from the database and it gives it back to the user. So this is a very simple application, right? So this backend is trying to talk to the database and it is trying to give the information back to the users when user has requested. Now, what is the information that this application require from database? Like it requires some information like what is the database port? What is the database username? What is the database password? Okay, and what is the for example connection type, or what are the number of connectors that are required, and a few more information that this application requires from the database. Now how this information is retrieved, this can be retrieved using a environment variable inside the application. Like that a hardcore or a thumb rule is that the application should not have these details hard coded, right? So if you have these details hard coded, what will be the problem in the future if these details gets changed? Okay, any of this information get changed, then the user will get null, or he gets some vague information. Okay, if there is a vague if there is any other username that got changed, or password that got changed, or the port got changed, so in such cases the user will get a wrong information, or he might not get any information at all regarding the user, right? So to solve this problem, you will not hard code this information inside the application, but a general practice is, we are not talking about Kubernetes at all. General practice is you will try to save this as part of environment variable, or you will try to save this as a specific file in a specific path inside your application or inside your file system, right? And you will try to retrieve this information from the file system using OS modules, right? Let's say you're using Python, you can use the OS module. You're using Java, you can get that from the operating system libraries that Java supports, right? So this is how you read the information. Now how do you do this inside the world of Kubernetes? Okay, so inside Kubernetes there are two things. One is, okay, with the same problem, let's say we want to solve the problem with respect to DB port and the DB connection type, all of these information. So I'm not talking about DB username and DB password. Okay. For some time, let's put DB username and DB password aside, and let us talk about only the DB port and DB connection type, these kind of information. Okay. So what Kubernetes says is, because Kubernetes basically deals with containers, okay, how a user can get this information as part of your container environment variable, or as part of your container, a specific file inside your container. Okay, so to achieve this, what Kubernetes says is, okay, so we support something called as config map. Okay, so what you can do is, as a DevOps engineer or as a configuration manager engineer, you can create a config map inside the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, and put the information like DB port or any kind of information inside the config map. Okay, and you can mount this config map, or you can use the details of the config map inside your Kubernetes pod. Okay, so the information can be stored inside your pod as an environment variable, or can be stored as a file inside your pod on your container file system. But this information has to be retrieved from the config map, because as a user you cannot log into the pod, you cannot go to the container, and once you go to the container you cannot create this environment variable, or so that's not a right practice. So because you can do it, but the problem is that sometimes you might not have access to the container login itself, or the other problem is that what if this fields gets changed continuously. Okay, or whenever you are creating the Docker file itself, you don't know these values. Okay, probably these values are fed to your application later point of time. So this is not possible, and what Kubernetes suggests is go with the config map. So as a DevOps engineer, what you need to do is you can collect this information that a user requires. You can talk to the database admin, and as a DevOps engineer, you can create a config map. And inside the config map, you can store these values. Once you store these values, you can mount this config map, or you can use this config map as the data of this config map as environment variables inside your Kubernetes pod. How you can do it? And what are the different ways? Like I told you, one is you can use them as environment variables, one is you can use them as volume mounts. So I'll talk about both the use cases when we go with the live demo. But for now, you understood the purpose of config map, right? So what problem config map is solving? So config map is solving the problem of storing the information that can be used by your application later point of time. Okay, so config map is used to store data, and this data can be at later point of time used by your application or your pod or your deployment. Now, if config map is solving this problem, why you need a secret in Kubernetes, right? So you should get this question like, okay, config map is solving this problem, then what is the purpose of secrets in Kubernetes? So secrets in Kubernetes solves the same problem, but secrets deal with sensitive data. That means to say, like, if you are just providing all of the information, if you go back to the previous slide, like I told you, you have parameters like DB password. Okay, you have parameters like DB username. Like if you try to put this information along with the DB port and all the details in the config map, there is a major problem in Kubernetes. That is, in Kubernetes, whenever you create a resource, what happens is this information gets saved in etcd. Okay, so if this information is getting saved in etcd, usually the data is saved as objects, and any hacker who tries to get access to etcd, they can retrieve the information. So if they are retrieving the information of your DB username and DB password, that means your entire application or your entire platform is compromised. So they can get the details of your database. So if they are getting details of your database, then your Kubernetes cluster does not have a proper security. So to solve this problem, what you will do is Kubernetes says that if you have non-sensitive data, then store it in config maps. If you have sensitive data, then store it in secrets. Now, what will happen if you store it in secrets? What difference does it make? So what Kubernetes says is, if you put any kind of data inside the secret, okay, what we will do is we will encrypt the data at the rest. That means to say, before the object is saved in etcd, Kubernetes will encrypt this one. Okay, so by default, Kubernetes uses a basic encryption, but what Kubernetes says is we will also allow you to use your own encryption mechanism, like the custom encryption. So you can pass these values to their API server and say that whenever you are storing, like, API server is feeding some information to the etcd, you can use this custom encryption. And even if hacker is trying to access this etcd, because he does not know the decryption key, right? So he can read all the information from etcd. Let's say he read the information about config maps, deployment, pod, everything. But when it comes to secrets, he will just retrieve a encrypted information that is of no use for him. Okay, so he just have to throw that information because he cannot read that. He does not have the decryption key. Okay, so that's why whenever you have encrypted, or sorry, whenever you have sensitive information, go with storing the objects or values in the secrets. Whenever you have non-sensitive information, then go with the config maps. Okay, so this is the differentiation between config maps and secrets. Now, what happens, like, okay, let's try to go a step back and let us see the step-by-step approach on what is happening. Like, let's say you are a user. Okay, as a user, you are creating a config map, for example. So what you will do is you will write a YAML file for config map, and inside the YAML file, like I told you, you will put all the details that are required. So you can get the YAML syntax from the Kubernetes documentation as well. And once you do this, you will use the kubectl apply. I'll show you all of these things in the demo as well. So you use the kubectl apply, and you create this config map on your Kubernetes cluster. So your config map got created. So what is happening here? Your config map is created, and at the same time, API server is saving this information inside the etcd as well. So this is the entire process with respect to config map. Now, for a hacker, if you are storing the sensitive information, he has 2 points to retrieve the information. One is, if the hacker has access to your Kubernetes cluster, one is he can come here. He can come to the config map. He can just say kubectl describe config map, or he can just say kubectl edit config map, and he can get the information from the config map. So your DB password is compromised. And the other thing that he can do is he can go to the etcd, and because the data is not encrypted, he can get the information from here as well. So these are the two problems, major problems that Secret is solving. Problem number two, I already explained. So at the etcd, the data is encrypted at the rest. So the hacker does not have the decryption key. So that's why your information is secure. But what about the point number one? You might say that, the hacker might come to the secrets, and he can again use the kubectl describe or edit, and he can read the information, right? So for that reason, what Kubernetes recommends is, apart from Kubernetes doing its part, so Kubernetes is doing its part, it is using the decryption, encryption. So Kubernetes is saying, whenever you create secrets, use a strong RBAC. Okay, say that no user should have access to RBACs who are not like, for example, there is a very popular concept in DevOps that is called as least privilege. Okay, least privilege is a concept where what you will do is you will only grant least access, like, very less number of people should have access to secrets. Okay, like the same concept with the IAM as well in AWS. So if you are restricting the access, like there is a developer who is trying to log into the Kubernetes cluster, like he can have read access to config maps, he can have read access to pods, he can have read access to deployments, but there is no requirement he has access to secrets. So you can prevent that in the user RBAC. You can just say that, okay, he should have access to all the resources but not secrets. So this is how you prevent both the things. Okay, so this is the difference between config map and secrets. If if your interviewer is asking you this question, what is the difference between config map and secret, this is how you explain him. Like, both the config map and secrets, both of them are used to store the information, or pass the information, or uh, for example, you might want to save some JSON data, you want to save some key value pair inside your Kubernetes cluster that will be later fed to your applications, which are in pods in Kubernetes. You can use both of them for the same purpose, but secrets is used for sensitive information, whereas config maps is used for non-sensitive information. And how does secrets solves this sensitive information problem? Like I told you, with secrets, the data is encrypted at the rest, and with secrets, you can enforce a strong RBAC, so that, for the entire secrets resource in Kubernetes, you can say only DevOps engineers should have access to it. You can do that using the Kubernetes RBAC. Okay, now we will not waste more time, and we'll quickly jump onto the demo, because demo also might take some time for us. So let me stop sharing here. Stop share. Perfect. So let me start sharing my other screen. So at this point of time, if the things are clear to you while I'm sharing my screen, just comment saying that, okay, so I'm able to understand, I'm not able to follow at any specific point. Okay, so your feedback is highly appreciated. Perfect. Now you should be able to see my terminal in 1, 2, 3 seconds. Perfect. So let me firstly clean my cluster. kubectl get deploy. Do have any deployments? I think I should have a few. So kubectl delete. I should have done this before. Sorry. Delete deployment. Sample Python app. Done. And kubectl get cm config map. Let me delete this config map as well. kubectl delete config map test config map. Perfect. So let's start with creating a config map. Okay. So vim cm.yaml, I'll just say this one. And here inside the config map.yaml, firstly, you have to provide the API version v1. Then you have to provide kind, which is as config map. Don't think that Abhishek is just typing it. How does he remember all of this? Like I do it on a day-to-day basis, so I remember. But you can also use the Kubernetes documentation, and you will not get any extra points for remembering this thing. Okay. Name as test CM. Then data, you can pass any data here. Like probably we'll use the same thing. DB hyphen port. Let us give the MySQL port. Let me just say 3306. Okay. So let me just save this one. Now let us create this. Always use kubectl apply over create. Why? I have already explained in the previous video. And if you know the answer, you can also comment that. Kubectl apply -f cm.yaml. So now if I just say kubectl get cm, you will notice that the config map is created. Now let us describe this and see. Kubectl describe cm test hyphen cm, right? So this is one data entry that we have saved in the config map. Similarly, you can save any number of data. Okay, as part of your application in your enterprise, your application might require a lot of fields. Then you can use a lot of fields here. Like later, you can point these fields as environment variables inside your Kubernetes pod. That is what we are going to see now. So my end goal now will be to take these fields from the config map and to put these fields as environment variables inside my Kubernetes pod. But for that, firstly, I have to create a Kubernetes pod itself. If you have watched my previous videos, git remote -v, this is one video that I explained Docker 0 to hero, where we have created a Python Django application, which I'm going to use here. Okay, now I will not explain this one more time because I've also explained this in the Kubernetes deployment, as well as the Docker 0 to hero video, how to create a Python Django application and host it as a application inside your container. We'll use the same container to just save the time. Now, this is my deployment.yaml file. Let me open this and let me get it back to the state. For example, I have to remove these fields. Sorry. So this is the same one that I explained in the previous video. Okay, in the Kubernetes deployment, we use the same deployment to create the Kubernetes pods. Okay, so I'll show you very quickly. If I just do kubectl apply -f deployment.yaml, what will happen here is it will create two Kubernetes pods because I have used the scaled replica as 2. Kubectl get pods -w for watching. 2 pods are created. Now, how do I look into the environment variables of these pods? You can just say kubectl exec the name of the pod hyphen /bin /bash. So you will exec -it is required so that I open it in an interactive terminal. Right now I am inside the pod, and here if I just say environment variable and followed by just let me search with db, you'll notice that there is no environment variable with respect to db because this is just an application running, and till now it does not have information of the database. Like it does not have the information of the database port. But let's say I'm using MySQL database in this application, and I want to use the information that is I want to know the database port of MySQL. So what I have to do is I have to go here and modify the deployment.yaml. And what I need to modify is I just need to add after the image or anywhere, you can provide something called as ENV, because I want to read the value as an environment variable, right? So here inside the ENV, what I will do is I will tell my Kubernetes deployment that, I need an environment variable, and the name of the environment variable should be DB port. Let's give caps. Okay. This should be name of the environment variable and the value of the environment variable. So how will you get the value of the environment variable? Don't worry, I created a config map. So to get the value from the config map. That is value from, what is a config map? Like I can provide the reference to my config map saying that config map ref, that is reference to the config map. So so this is the name of the environment variable. What should be the value of the environment variable? The DB port that we have provided in the config map. So that's why I'm saying value from config map reference And here, what is the name of the config map? Because Kubernetes has to know where it has to get, right? So name of the config map is, what did we create? The name of the config map, I think test-cm. And the value, or like, what is the key where I have stored the database port. So the key inside the config map that I stored is, I think, db-port. Let us quickly go back and see. So vim cm.yaml, sorry, cm.yml. So you will see that, okay, so this is the port. So I have to pass this so that Kubernetes can retrieve this information. I think I have already passed the right one. If I go to the deployment.yaml, key is db-port, name of the config map is test-cm, and the environment variable name inside the Python application that I want is db port. So now the expectation that I have is, as soon as I deploy this Kubernetes deployment, so it should override the existing pods, and inside the pods, if I just say env grep db, right? The expectation is, now I should see a new environment variable called db-port, and the value of the environment variable should be 3306. So this is my expectation. Now let me see if my expectation will match or not. For that, kubectl apply -f deployment.yaml. So it said that, okay, it threw an error and it says validation error, deployment env value from. Okay, so it said that it does not know value from unknown field config map ref. Okay, so it said that the config map ref name that we have provided is wrong. I think there is some syntax error here. Config perfect map. Okay, sorry, my bad. So that's why you always have to follow the documentation. You should not go by your gut. So it should be config map followed by key ref. Okay, so you will do these mistakes. Don't worry, if you're not doing mistakes, you will not learn things. So here I've done a mistake that it should be config map key reference. So that's fine. Now if I apply it one more time, it should get created. Perfect. Now kubectl get pods -w. I'm watching it again. See, these containers are getting created. The previous ones, the previous pods are getting terminated and the new ones are getting created. Perfect. Let's give it some time for the ones to be running. I hope that is done. So let me just say kubectl get pods. Perfect. So they are running 25 seconds ago and 21 seconds ago. That means I hope they are good. Now again, kubectl get pods. Let me exec into one of this. I can pick randomly anything. Let's pick this one. Kubectl exec -it, name of the pod. What I'll do is /bin/bash, so that I'll go to the pod. Now I'm inside the pod. Let me say env grep. I hope this will work -i db, so that, okay, let me use db itself. I use the capital db and let's see. Perfect. db port is 3306. So our purpose is solved. Now the developer, what he can do inside his Java application, he can just say that, for example, or inside the Python application, he can just say os.db port, or os.env or environ of, he can just say db-port, and he can retrieve the value for his database connection, right? So this is how you use the config map inside an application as environment variable. But now there is a problem. I'll show you what that problem is. And this problem your interviewers will definitely ask. Okay, how will you use your config map inside your Kubernetes pod? So if you say this way, okay, so this way you can use your application and value inside your application. But the problem is, let's say I am the DevOps engineer and I realize that for some reason I want to change the, let me get out. For some reason I want to change the DB port. Okay, so the DB port is occupied, or consider it as some variable with respect to DB that I want to change. Now how do I change this? Okay, so I'll just come to the config map and instead of 06 I'll say 07. I'll save it. Now how will the pod come to know about this change? Okay, so if I just do kubectl exec again, we'll go to the same pod one more time, and if you see, the DB port name will remain the same. Okay, if you just say grep DB, it will be 3306 only. So your application will continue to use 3306 and it will fail because the port has changed. So the database admin has changed the port and your application is not understanding that the port is changed. So your application will try to connect to the DB, but it will never get connected. So to solve this problem, what Kubernetes has said is, if you have this kind of information, if you have the information that keeps changing, okay, the changing the environment variables inside Kubernetes is not possible. Inside containers is not possible. You can never update a value. Like today, you can go to any container and try to update the environment variable value and let me know what happens. Abhishek, you will say, Abhishek, I cannot change the value inside the environment variable because container does not allow changing the environment variable. You have to recreate the container. But in production, you cannot restart the containers, okay? Because it might lead to some traffic loss. If you are deleting the deployment and recreating the deployment, you might incur some traffic loss, which is not expected. So the other way that Kubernetes suggests is, why can't you use volume mounts? Okay, so Kubernetes says, like, instead of this approach, go with an approach called volume mounts. Okay, so using the volume mounts, what you can do is you can using the volume mounts, you can do the same thing, but instead of using them as environment variables, you will use them as files, because you are mounting, right? So your config map information will be saved inside a file, and developers can read the information from the file instead of environment variable. Let us see how to do that. Okay, so again, I'll open the deployment.yaml. Now, instead of this, I'll delete this environment thing. Okay, so instead of environment thing, what I'll do is I will do a volume mount. Okay, but to do a volume mount, the first thing that you have to do is you have to create the volume itself, right? So let me leave this space so that you understand. And here, what I will do is at the level of the containers. Okay, so here at the level of the container, what you will do is you will create a volume. So you just say volumes, whatever the name of the volume that you would like to. So let me say the name of the volume is DB connection, for example. And inside that, what I will say is this volume should read the information from ConfigMap. So in Kubernetes, you can create different type of volumes. You can create external volumes, you can create internal volumes, persistent volumes, ConfigMap. So in this case, I'm creating a volume that reads the information from ConfigMap. Okay, and again, the name of the ConfigMap, what was it? It is test-cm. Okay, so this is the volume that I've created, and here you can mount the volume. Okay, for that you can simply say volume mounts. So what is happening here? The first thing that happened is I have created a volume. Why did I create a volume? Because a volume is nothing but a storage, right? It's just a block. And inside that, what I'm saying is read the information from ConfigMap. So this is just like a Docker volume that I explained you previously. And now I have to read this value inside the pod. For that, what I'll do is I'll mount the volume. So mounting the volume is nothing but reading this volume inside the Kubernetes pod. Okay, for that, in the volume mounts, I'll say name. What is the name? You have to provide the same name, that is DB connection. Okay, and where do you want to mount this? So inside the Kubernetes pod, on which folder do you want to mount it, or on which disk or which file system do you want to mount it? I'll simply say mount path as /opt. You can use any path. Okay, now if I save this, sorry, if I save this and if I just do kubectl kubectl apply -f deployment.yaml, you will again notice that, okay, if I just do kubectl get pods -w, so the pods are created 4 seconds ago and 6 seconds ago. That means they just got created as soon as I applied. Now let me do exec one more. Oh, sorry, I have to get the pod name, right? To exec kubectl get pods. I'll clear my screen, get the pods, use one of these pods, and what will happen now is the environment variable should get deleted because we have removed the environment, right? So if I exec into one of these pods, and if I just say --bin/bash, now you will see if I again do env pipe grep db, there is no environment variable because we have removed it, right? That is working fine. Now again, what I did is I have also mounted this. So let us see if it got mounted on the /opt folder. Perfect, it got mounted. Now it says that there is a file called dbport. Let us see what is the value of the dbport. Cat dbport pipe more. what happened? Oh, sorry. Cat /opt/db port pipe more. See what is the port? 3306, right? So this got mounted inside the what is it? The file system. Okay. Now what I can do is, again I can go to kubectl, edit configmap, vim configmap.yaml, sorry, cm.yaml. And here what I will do is, okay, I changed the port, but I did not apply. Sorry for that. So let me apply the port. Uh, Anyways, you have seen what is inside the container, or what is inside the pod, right? So you have noticed that inside the pod, there is a file called dbport and the value is 3306. Now let me apply this change, kubectl apply -f cm.yaml. Okay, now my expectation is the Kubernetes pod, without getting restarted, it should know the value of the config map has changed. Let us see if it will understand or not. Now, again, what I will do is, firstly, to show you, kubectl describe cm test cm. See, the DB port has changed. Now, I will show you that the pod is not restarted. Kubectl get pods, the timestamp will be more. So see, it is 2 minutes before. That means it did not get restarted as soon as I updated the config map, right? So now let us exec into this pod and let us see inside that file the name of the, or the port number has changed or not automatically. So I did not change anything, right? Inside the pod I did not log in and I did not change it. Exec -it///bin/bash, fingers cross, cat /opt/db port. Now I'm expecting the port number should be 3307. Perfect, it got changed. You'll not believe me, so I'll do it one more time. configmap.yml. Okay, you might say that, Abhishek, I don't believe it, so let me change it one more time. 3309. Okay, now again let me apply it. Apply -f, sorry, fingers, yeah, apply -f. This got applied again. So you have to give it couple of seconds for it to get refreshed inside your Kubernetes pods. So let's do it one more time. kubectl exec. Every time you don't have to exec into the pod, I was just showing you, but what I can also do is cat /opt/db port here as well, and you will notice that the port has changed. Oh, sorry, it hasn't changed. Now, like I told you, give it a couple of seconds. So this is perfect. Let us keep doing it and let us see if it gets changed or not. Did I change here? kubectl describe config map test cm. Did I apply it? Yeah, I applied it, right? So let us see. Let us keep doing it, and I'm sure it will change. Perfect. It got changed, right? I know you wouldn't have believed me if I have not showed this, but yeah. So the port number has updated. Like I told you, it will take couple of seconds because Kubernetes continuously keeps reading the config map and looks for the changes. So now it understood that, okay, the mount has changed, and like, be patient, give it a couple of seconds because it will take couple of seconds to reflect. Okay, so you can keep trying it, add new values to the config map, keep doing it. So similarly, you can do it for secret as well. So there is no rocket science. For secrets and config maps, the behavior is same. So even what I can do is I can just create a secret for you. Kubectl create. So there are different types of secrets. There can be TLS secrets, there can be a generic secret. Okay, we are not talking about that because it will be out of context today. So I can just say kubectl create secret, generic secret. TLS is basically to store the certificates, but here we are just storing username and password, right? DB password. So kubectl create secret generic, and let me call this secret name as test secret. Okay, and what I will do is, you can also use the same secret.yaml file to write it, but I'm just showing you the other way. Like, you can create config map like this as well. kubectl create config map, name of the config map. Again, you can provide the details. Just for projecting or showing you the other way of creating a secret, I'm just showing you here. Okay, so from literal means to say that you are creating a basic literal. Okay, so here I will say the literal name as db. What was the name that we showed? I think db port, right? Okay, db port is equals to 3306. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm just showing you the other way of creating. As soon as I create, the secret got created. You can also do it the same way using secret.yml as well. Same way that I did for the config map. So now if I do kubectl describe secret followed by the name of the secret was test secret. Okay, so see what is there here. DB port, it says 4 bytes. So this is exactly what I told you during the theory class, right? So if I just do kubectl edit secret test secret, I told you that what Kubernetes does is it will encrypt in base 64. Okay, so this is the base 64 encrypted, but this is not a great encryption. By default, Kubernetes does not support great encryption. You can encrypt using your own way. For encryption here, you can use something like HashiCorp Vault, or you can use sealed secrets, or you can use any different thing for encrypting the secrets on your Kubernetes namespace level, or during your Kubernetes secret creation. But at the rest, using etcd, you have to pass it to the API server, whatever your encryption key is. Okay, but here your Kubernetes secret got saved, and if you want to understand, like, what is this secret value, just to say that is it 3306 or not, you can again say echo the field here, and you can just say base 64 hyphen decode. Okay, so it will decode, and see the port number is 3306. So Kubernetes does not have great encryption whenever you are creating the secrets by default. So if you want to keep it more and more secure, you can use the applications that I just told you, but that's fine. Always importance is to secure it at the level of etcd, and that comes at your Kubernetes security, where you can use a encryption key. Okay, if you want to know more about it, read how to encrypt etcd for secrets. I also explained it in one of the previous classes regarding Kubernetes security. Okay, so this is the one here, like I have created the secret. Now, instead of this port, what you can do is, for your demo or for you to practice, use the same example and create a new secret for DB password. Okay, and provide a password here, probably Abhi, and create a new secret called test secret 1. And your exercise for today is to repeat the same exercise. So instead of config map key reference, you can just say secret key reference. Like if you go to my deployment.file, deployment.yaml file, right? So here, whatever I used, just replace the config map secret. Like, here I said volumes, right? So inside the volume, inside this config map, just replace it with secret, or you can follow the Kubernetes documentation. And if you want to read it as environment variable, like I showed you in the previous example, you can just say secret key reference and provide the information. But you will get all of this information inside your Kubernetes documents. I'll put the link in the description as well. Consider this as your homework or assignment, and I explained you everything regarding config map. Now you have to do it with respect to secret, okay, so that you learn it. I hope you enjoyed the video for today. If you have any questions, put that in the comment section. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. Finally, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, Abhishek.Veeramalla. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.